Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. My first appearance in a week. It seems like a long, long time in the world of Celtic. And I'm going to be speaking about that with Lawrence Conley and Ian Conroy. Here we go. I said it was like riding a bike. I've already messed up my lines. Lawrence, welcome back. You're in the Skylark Bar. And Ian Conroy is dialing in all the way from New Zealand. It's the early hours for Ian, but that is Celtic's fan base. Thanks, everybody, for keeping the fires burning when I was away for a cheeky wee week. I'll come back to that in a moment or two. I'll come back, though, Lawrence, and it looks as though we're about to sign 3 new players. How good is that?
It's excellent, mate. Middle of July, Euro's finished. We're starting to make signings. Happy days. Don't have a lot left to get everybody up and running for the 4th of August, though, do we? I think we're needing more than 3 in the door. But, it's a good start if we get the 3 done.
We do need more than the 3 that are going to be discussed today, and we will be looking at what you think we need to be doing after these 3 deals are in place, because obviously we lost 3 players at the end of the season in Adam Ida, Paulo Bernardo, who will be discussed today, and Joe Hart. And it's about not only replacing them, but improving this quality of the squad. Loads more to talk about. A couple of pre-season friendlies under our belt. Ian Conroy, when the Casper Schmeichel deal became pretty clear that it was happening, it wasn't just speculation a few days ago, made my comments on the socials, and what I said was I'm happy with the signing. I can absolutely see the benefit in bringing in someone like Casper Schmeichel, particularly when you look at the other goalkeeper that we're looking to bring in today from Aston Villa. But it does seem as though in terms of the recruitment strategy and the way that it's actually structured at the moment, we've got 3 guys running about doing all the deals, identifying players, and the structure still isn't perfect. And that's probably why it's, Lawrence has alluded to the Euros. There are other things happening. But obviously we should be going away to an American training camp, and you would have hoped that we had more players than the 3 that we're going to be talking about today. So I don't want to be negative about it, Ian, but I do think it's caveated by the fact that we're not quite there yet. It's not perfect yet, is it, the strategy?
No, it's at least it's not the first game of the season against Kilmarnock that we're talking about it. And it's the pre-season games over in America. It's not ideal, but at least there's some news, and at least it's. I'm happy with the Casper Schmeichel deal. I think he's he had a good Euros. I think he's still fit. I think he's still got another couple of years at least in him. And judging by the reports, see John Yogi Hughes, his old manager, said he raved about him and said he was a good person as well, which is a really positive thing, obviously, because we all held Joe Hart in such high esteem. So hopefully that's just a continuation of that. And Sinisalo, I watched the show reel as we all do. We can go on YouTube these days, and it was his season at Exeter, and obviously it's all the best bits, but it looked pretty decent from just that one clip. Obviously, you can't sort of denote the true reflection of a player on that, but it looked all right. But in terms of the structure, again, I think it's pretty well known my feelings on it. I don't see it changing anytime soon. I think it was a false dawn with Ange. I think he just came in as bullish as he was, and he went and just brought in the players that he wanted and demanded. I don't know whether Brendan's a bit more, I wouldn't say passive. He's certainly not a passive character, but he's not. He doesn't seem to be as demanding as Ange seemed to be. That's why it's taken a bit longer. But anyway, at least it's progress. It's some news rather than the no news that we had last week.
It's good news, absolutely. Now, I'll come back to the structural part of it. I don't want to start off the show by criticising the club when we're going to be talking about 3 new arrivals. But talking about 3 new arrivals, there's another arrival coming in this afternoon, and it's Liam Carrigan all the way from Japan. And it's always an absolute pleasure to see you, Liam. Welcome back to the show, my friend. How are you keeping? They can hear us. Can the big man hear us? He might have to come back in. I've waited a whole week for that, and he stood me up. Right, here we go. Casper Schmeichel, let's talk about that straight off the bat. We signed a goalkeeper, Lawrence, and Joe Hart, that divided opinion. And that's what happened, right? Because if you go back to when we signed him, you can check out the social media announcement by the club. You can go and listen to podcasts from around the time. A lot of people weren't convinced with Joe Hart, but he went on and he showed over the 3 seasons that he was an excellent signing, not only with his performances, but with the leadership qualities that he brought to that dressing room. Now, I know that we're bringing in Casper Schmeichel at 37, right? We brought in Joe Hart at what, 34 was Joe Hart when he came in? 37 years of age. In terms of a signing, as I say, I was talking it up. I was bigging it up. I see it as a no-brainer. He's got bags of experience. You know, he's just played in the Euros for Denmark there. He's got, you know, a Premiership Champions winners medal under his belt with Leicester City. He won the FA Cup under Brendan Rodgers at Leicester City. Bags of experience, over 100 international caps. I think it's a tremendous signing, Lawrence. My criticism is around the fact that obviously it's coming from Brendan Rodgers' notebook. However, if you can do that and you can plunge into your contact list as Ange did brilliantly, fair play. I think it's a great signing. What's your feelings on Casper Schmeichel?
I think, delighted to see him come on board, especially with the idea of bringing in the young keeper. Is it Sinisalo from Villa? So there looks to be some succession planning there. Looks like Brendan's saying, right, we'll get this boy in for a year, 2 years. We've got a backup keeper that we can train up. And if you look at his comments in Vata, you know, it looks like he was going to be third choice striker. So it looks like Brendan's certainly planning on player development alongside his signing strategy, which has got to be positive, because we always talk about, you know, the need for us to develop players and bring them on. You know, would have been happier to get, you know, a 27-year-old that had his best years ahead of him rather than behind him. Probably, but you know, what level would the money would we have had to pay to brought in somebody a Hart or Schmeichel's quality? You know, maybe we didn't get a first choice signing, who knows? But yeah, delighted to get him on board. Delighted to have coupled it with bringing in another younger keeper that they can develop and train up. So you know, it looks like that it's kind of a decent strategy from us there.
Yeah, well, absolutely agree with that, Lawrence. And you look at both the goalkeepers that we're going to be discussing today, Sinisalo and Schmeichel, and obviously what made them was their spells in the lower reaches of Scottish football. Sinisalo with Ayr United, Schmeichel with Falkirk. And it was brought to my attention earlier on, and obviously I love a wee bit of nostalgia. Earlier on today, 2007, Celtic went to Falkirk. And let's have a look at the date here. It was the 18th of March 2007. And they beat us 1-0. They beat us 1-0. And Schmeichel saved a penalty from Craig Beattie, the Celtic team, whereas follows. This just shows you how long Casper Schmeichel's been playing. Boruc, Wilson came off for a guy called Gravison. Presley, McManus, Naylor, Hartley, Lennon, Nakamura, Jarazic, who was substituted for McGeady, Miller, Kenny Miller, replaced by Zoraski, and of course the aforementioned Beattie. Sent off Stephen McManus in 38 minutes, and the goal was scored by Thompson of Falkirk. Casper Schmeichel saving the penalty, Stephen Thompson scoring the goal. And I think that when you look back, that far back, Ian, when Neil Lennon's playing for us and Tommy Gravison's playing for us, there's a young Casper Schmeichel in goals on loan at Falkirk under John Hughes. Obviously, you mentioned him before. The lesser famous John Hughes, that is, not the one that you will see tomorrow in a Celtic state of mind. But that bag, you know, the bags and bags of experience that he brings to this football club, there was a gaping hole that was left when Joe Hart left, wasn't there? And I think that he fills that absolutely perfectly.
Of course he does. You know, and it's like, you know, we look back to, he was obviously a very young man back in those days. So look at all the miles on the clock he's accumulated, which obviously will see his experience, you know, and at a high level. So it's a very high level he's been playing at. He's just finished the Euros, high, you know, it's international football, the European Championships, you know, so it's a higher level you can't get. So perfect preparation to come in, and to you know, obviously hopefully a positive Champions League campaign under this new format. No, I think it's a really good move. I think a lot of us would have said that before it was announced. You know, so the rumour mill went to overdrive a little bit. And I think the complementing with Sinisalo, it looks like to be, it just kind of mirrors the things that we were all kind of saying. You know, we needed the two keepers, so the experienced keeper. So it just takes that pressure off the younger guy as well. He's not coming in and he's going to have to basically, be the number one. That's it. You're the man. You don't get that at Celtic. The pressure's immense. So, Casper Schmeichel will be able to sort of handle that pressure. I've no doubt. He's been there and done it. So it's that kind of safe pair of hands that we're kind of looking for.
You know the thing, right? A couple of points I'm going to make. The first one being the fact that we're bringing in the experienced goalkeeper, and let's be honest, a big name as well, Ian. Big name. I know that his father preceded him, and I loved that Denmark story when they went to the Euros in '92, and they weren't even meant to be there, and they just turned up and won it. Schmeichel's and goals, brilliant, absolutely great. When I was still in love with football beyond Celtic, I've kind of fallen out with all types of football outside of the world of Celtic. And then the Euros this year, I'm going to have to share something with you. You brought it up, Ian. You brought it up, the Euros, right? So I found myself in Tenerife for the final of the Euros. And the reason I never made a big song and dance about that, I'll come back to that later. But obviously, the Acsom fires were kept burning by guys like yourselves. Big shout out to Kevin Graham on the hosting duties, Chris McElwain on the hosting duties, and of course, last week's This Is Acsom that was hosted by Asim Rabani and Chris McElwain with Kevin McDermott. Tremendous talent. Ian, I'm pretty sure you'll be well aware of Kevin McDermott from the music scene back in the 1980s. In the 1990s as well. He was involved in that phenomenal, underrated classic tune, Don't Come Home Too Soon by Delamitri as well. He's in the video. So why was I there? Well, I went for a wee break. Reason I didn't make a big song and dance about it, I don't know if you noticed, Big John Hughes, our very own John Hughes, mentioned it online, that some of our friendly neighbours thought it was a good idea to post my home address online for no other reason than the banter, obviously, which involved a wee bit of a security measure at the studio. And so when I'm going away, I'm not going to broadcast it that much because there's a few dafties out there who might think it's a good idea to pay us a visit. So we've got the security in place, went away for a wee week, and the scenes on the streets in Tenerife were incredible after the game. I'll tell you this much. If I ever say to my wee fella who won the Euros in 2024, he will never forget that. We watched it on the biggest screen, I think, in Spain. And I'm going to say I wasn't gutted with the result. I wasn't gutted. I won't labour it. But yeah, that tournament that has just concluded, Casper Schmeichel was there. Lawrence Conley has been saying maybe we were waiting on the Euros and all the rest of it. And people were saying, don't be daft. We don't deal with clubs or countries that are at the latter stages of the Euros. Well, Denmark were there. Casper Schmeichel played. And the fact that he's going to be mentoring a new recruit, it's just a shame, Lawrence, because I thought we had a great opportunity to do something similar with Joe Hart. When Joe Hart came in, bringing that young understudy, maybe 22, 23-year-old, work with a guy like Hart for 2 or 3 seasons, it would have been invaluable, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe we'll try to get rid of Siegrist. He's looked as if he's going to leave a couple of times. Surely he's leaving now. But maybe we didn't want the extra keepers on board. I don't know how much the likes of Toby and Josh Clark would have done with Joe Hart, if any work at all. Josh Clark had done well out on loan. But, I mean, that's kind of what you miss from the reserve league, isn't it? Experienced players passing on their knowledge.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is something that we had the opportunity to do. Obviously, Brendan's in as or back in it as manager, and he's putting that into place. I touched on it. It looked as if he was wanting to do the same with the striking position.
Yeah.
And we've been going on about, how do we develop youth? How do we get them in? When do they play? And it looks like, Brendan's got a plan. Anyway, he's going third choice striker. That would be a development striker. Looked like it was going to be one from our own ranks, which would have been ideal. I don't know if we're going to sign a development one now, but with all leaving the building, it looks like Ida's coming in. You think we'd need a third striker, wouldn't you? And in all likelihood, I think it'll be a development striker.
Right. I thought those comments were really interesting around Rocco Vata. We're going to be coming back to that, and also the comments around Daniel Kelly as well. Where does it leave us in terms of goalkeepers then? Because at the moment, we're expecting the announcement of Schmeichel and Sinisalo, which will leave us with those 2 goalkeepers, as well as Scott Bain, Benji Siegrist, Josh Clark, Toby Owulayemi. And obviously there are other younger goalkeepers at the club. But Ian, the way I would look at that is it's time to clear the decks. I don't see there being any place at Celtic for Siegrist. I was as surprised as anybody. I was as surprised as the Celtic TV commentator to see him on the park against Queen's Park, because he didn't even know he was on the park for about 15, 20 minutes. I guess the question will be around the two young goalies. They've gone out on loan, and I think Clark's performed pretty well whilst he was out at Ayr United. And then you look at the Olayemi situation, came in really highly rated. Ian hasn't been able to make the breakthrough, sat on the bench a couple of times. Olayemi was on the bench against Bodo Glimt on the 2 games under Ange Postecoglou. And from that point up until now, he's not really progressed. The 2 loan deals haven't worked out for him in Ireland and Austria. So who do we keep? Because I think you need 3 strong goalies. But I do reckon you can run with the third one. Like Lauren says with the striker, the third one can be a development player. So I think if we bring in 2 new keepers, it's an opportunity to clear the decks and then promote either Clark or Olayemi into that third position. Do you think that's the plan, Ian?
Possibly, but I'm kind of sort of referencing the comments I've seen online today about Brendan Rodgers coming out about Lawwell and Holm, the 2 younger players as well. And it's like, I mean, I'm all for that if they're showing up in training and they're showing that mettle and that and doing what they're supposed to be doing, because clearly Holm and Bosun Lawwell are not doing that at the moment. They're not running hard enough and not putting enough effort in. So I would go with obviously the 2 new keepers and stick with Bain, unless he can be sort of deposed by one of the 2 younger guys. It's the only way you're going to get that kind of sort of I keep saying this as my new favourite saying, conveyor belt. But the only way you're going to get that sort of going is if you've got younger players coming through and following behind it, and it'll stifle that talent. Say if the likes of Bain hangs around, and albeit I think he's a good influence in the dressing room. I think kind of similar to like Scott Carson at Man City, keeps getting 1-year deal extensions because he's good around the place, which you can't really underestimate that as well. But not to the detriment of sort of stifling young talent coming through. So in answer to the question, if as long as they're performing and doing it, then I'm sure Brendan will have no problem putting them in as that backup.
You see, you've brought up Bosun Lawwell and Odin Holm, right? And I'm glad you did, because like everybody else, I was watching those 2 bounce games. It's just great to have the football back, right? I mean, I was watching them, enjoying them, and trying to gauge where we were with a lot of these new faces, some of whom are young guys on the periphery of the squad. And I've got to say, Lawrence, I was impressed over the 2 games with both of those players. I thought, particularly against Ayr United, I thought Lawwell was really good. Holm was quite steady. He looked willing to take the ball. You know these guys that hide and don't take responsibility. He doesn't seem to be one of the players. If he's on his own 20-yard box, 18-yard line, he'll take the ball. Similarly, up top, he tries to make things happen. So of the 2 games, I'm looking at those 2 players and thinking, wow, they've done pretty well. Surely they've given the gaffer something to think about. And then Brendan Rodgers comes out and says pretty much the opposite. So he's watching them on a day-to-day basis, isn't he? And, it could well be great management to come out and say, you guys think that you are doing all right. There's maybe some casual observers watching the games who think you're doing all right. I'm telling you, you're nowhere near it. And that's what he came out. And it seemed pretty brutal, but it could be obviously something that will get both players up to that level. A wee bit of tough love, maybe.
Yeah, it seems to be about the application and training, doesn't it? I'm needing you to push it, because you're saying that both got it, and obviously a name checked our Doyle's own Francis Turley, has been a guy that's doing it as well. So he's definitely trying to manage these guys and motivate them to do better. And Holm was a bit of a wonder kid when we signed him. What was it, 2.5, 2.8 million or something you signed him for? So it's a significant investment for us. He looked good in fleeting glances, in the first team. But Brendan's seen him week in, week out. And he needs to be up that level in training. And this is what it takes to get them focused and to get them doing it. Happy days. Yeah, And I suppose Brendan's shown a bit of a ruthless streak with another couple of young players. If you don't want to be here, you're not going to put your application in training. There'll be somebody else takes your place. You can move on and do whatever elsewhere. But unless you're going to be 100% focused on Celtic, it's probably not a place for you.
I think that's a great approach. We'll come on to Daniel Kelly, of course, Rocco Vata, a couple of other guys that, when I was looking at my list earlier this week and updating it on the players that I wanted to leave the club, I thought those two guys would have maybe gone out on development loans. Obviously, Brendan Rodgers has come out and said, no, he had a different plan for Vata. He did have a plan for him, and he wanted him to be that third striker. When you look at Celtic at the moment, Ian, in terms of strikers, we've lost one. We've lost the big man, O. Let's have a wee chat about him for a second, because this transfer window, obviously, we're really keen to get players in the door. We know we need them, but we need to trim the squad also. And there was a lot of non-contributing players ahead of O, if you like, that I would have liked to have seen leaving the building. But it does seem like a good bit of business. It didn't seem to be in favour with Brendan Rodgers. He got a couple of opportunities last season to lead the line. Kyogo was benched, and he didn't really take the opportunity, did he? And I was actually surprised to see him playing against Queen's Park, because the Genk deal seemed quite far down the line, and obviously it has now been concluded. Probably best for all parties, but I was a wee bit disappointed in the way that O's Celtic career turned out, and he showed some flashes, I felt, under Ange Postecoglou.
I think he'll be one that we regret letting go, to be honest. I would have liked to have seen him going out on loan. And it was interesting when Genk signed him, the attributes that they were listing were things that I've seen, and I'm sure a lot of fans have seen, in that kind of that he's a bit of a handful. He's got a lot more to sort of learn and give, I think. And I think maybe a season out on loan wouldn't be a bad thing, and sort of assess it later on. Whether we've got a buyback clause in there, I very much doubt it. I should have been Celtic, but I think, especially if he was going to make Vata the third choice striker, I thought O had a lot more to offer than Vata. But that said, I hadn't seen a great deal of Vata. So yeah, it's a shame, to be honest. I think I would like to have seen him stay in some capacity.
Well, again, how many times, Lawrence, have we discussed it on this show? You need to promote the youth players, and if the youth player is a third choice in every position, I would be quite happy with that. And we said that before. If we're bringing in Schmeichel as number one to mentor Sinisalo, and the third choice goalie is either Clark or Owoliemi, brilliant. Up top, first choice striker Kyogo. We've got Ida coming in, I hope, and then the third choice being a young guy coming through. I think that's a great way to move the club forward in terms of the young talent, because, and we'll speak about Kelly as well, if they don't get that opportunity or that pathway is not visible to them, Lawrence, they just won't stay. And we've seen it with so many of the youngsters over the years.
Yeah, maybe it's thinking, O's too good to be a third choice striker. What's the value in him sitting third choice, not getting games, not developing? And he's stopped walking cash in. Hopefully we'll get some of the money to spend. But we obviously prefer Dido over him. So yeah, Brendan's got a plan for developing. And how often do we really go to the third choice striker? It's not very often. When we're playing with one up top, we're going to third choice. So it's ideal. Yeah, he seems to be doing it with a keeper, and he's no doubt got a plan throughout the squad. I mean, he said to Kelly's agent, unless this is tied up before the summer, not going to be involved in pre-season. And I suppose saw Aidan Nisbet coming out talking about how he wanted away and he thought it'd be better for his development, and it turned out not to be. Listen, it might be better for them to go financially, and it's hard to turn down, isn't it? Well, I think we offered Rocco 8 and Watford's offering 25. It's a huge difference, isn't it? And it's something they would have to gamble on, that they'd be better staying at Celtic for the long term and going to Watford.
The big thing, Lawrence, and it's something that we are a victim of our environment at times when it comes to the young troops coming through, because we're not in a situation like some of these English clubs. I mean, Watford, no disrespect to them whatsoever, but they can pay a young player the kind of sums you've just mentioned there. And you go down a couple of the levels to a player who's playing youth football at Watford. Let's use that as an example. They will be getting paid substantially more than a kid playing at Celtic at that level. And obviously we've seen it so many times where a young player breaks through and instantly they get a new deal because they've made their mark in the first team. And we know as a football club that the vultures will be, circling Celtic Park. Tony Watt, I think it was a day after the Barcelona goal, we got him on a deal. Tony Ralston, we've seen it down the years. It does happen because we do not
Wayne
pay.
Miller couldn't get hold of his agent. Remember that?
God bless him. What a player he was as well. But these guys coming through, Lawrence, they're on, I say a pittance, right? They're on decent wages for a 16, 17-year-old typically. But in terms of the world of football, they're nowhere near what their counterparts will be getting down at Watford. And what then happens is these young guys, like Rocco Vata, for example, they're getting into the underage squads on an international basis. And if they're getting into an England squad or an Ireland squad and they're playing with these guys down south, listen, they're going to be talking about wages and all that. And they'll know what their counterparts are getting down south. So on the one hand, Celtic need to obviously pay within their means, Ian, because this is where we are. We're in the environment of Scottish football where you can't pay every young player £1,000 a week because they're not getting £1,000 a week, right? You know, when they're playing under 17s football or they're playing Lowland League football, they're not in the first team squad. We can't be paying all these guys big money until they've proven that they're first team quality. But when that happens, the jump is so vast. You could be going from under £1,000 a week to an offer of around 8 or 10 grand from Celtic, which is huge. That's massive for Celtic. There's first team players on that kind of wage at Celtic. You know, I remember the famous one, or the surprising one rather, being Ryan Christie. When Christie was talking about a new contract and his wages are revealed to be like 8.5 grand at the time or something like that. He'd been playing first team football for 2 or 3 seasons at Celtic Park. So, I'll criticise a club where it's merited, but we are in a difficult position with the environment in which we live in. It's not possible, Ian, to pay all the young guys until they've proven themselves a better wage.
No, it's not. But it's kind of that I suppose it comes down to the guidance that they're getting from outside as well as their own thoughts. You know, that it's football's littered with players who had promise and have gone off and chosen. You know, they've chosen. It's a game of chance as well, isn't it? You know, they go and sign somewhere and it's the promised land. They're making more money with a good contract, but then the manager leaves and things happen and it doesn't always quite work out. Equally, on the boot on the other foot, it sometimes allows them to flourish and they go off and into the stratosphere. So it's the chance you take. But we've lost quite a few players, it has to be said. You know, we lost a guy to Leeds, didn't we? There's a lot. We lost a guy to Bayern Munich. I can't remember their names now. Their names escape me.
Was it Held? Remember Leo Held went to Leeds, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah.
And we lost a couple to Bayern Munich, actually. Liam Morrison and Barry Hepburn.
That's it. Yeah, Liam Morrison as well, yeah. Who I thought was full of promise as well. You know, he looked good. I've not sort of tracked their progress. So, but you know, it's a big step. You know, they must be highly regarded to go to Bayern Munich, and you think of the competition there. These elite teams, you know, they go and send the cream to the creme of everywhere. You know, all the academies. I imagine the Hoover up. We look at Man City, for example. You know, look, Cole Palmer couldn't even get in their team. You know, so that is an embarrassment of riches beyond any of our wildest dreams. But again, you know, it's that we simply can't afford to go and offer what Watford offered Vata. You know, but if that's his kind of his driving mechanism, then we've got to say, thanks very much and see you later. You know, it's we want players who really want to play for Celtic. You know, and see that, because if you make it at Celtic, it's proven you'll get the move anyway. You know, you'll get a move away. You'll get that. You get exposure in the Champions League. You know, it might not be positive exposure, but you at least get a platform if you're playing for the Celtic first team. Usually, we win the league every year. You know, so there's that enticement as well. So it's just one of those things. Ultimately, you know, we're connected to the same landmass as England, and it's just a crazy environment.
Yeah, it is a world apart. We need to be very cute in the transfer market, and it's a difficult one with the young players. And I thought that the comments made by Brendan Rodgers were pretty bold, because some of these young guys' agents will be playing hardball with Celtic as well. Daniel Kelly, big Celtic fan. Rocco Vata, Celtic daft. Rocco Vata, he didn't want to leave Celtic. He wanted to play for Celtic, and that gets lost. That gets lost in all the chat online and all the noise online. But if you are negotiating with the football club you've been at since you were an 8-year-old kid, and someone comes along from anywhere and offers you 2 or 3 times what you're getting offered, you're going to be advised, if your advisor's doing their job, you're going to be advised to move on. And unfortunately, we've lost a lot of young players. Like Ian says, though, who knows what's going to become of that young talent? We'll probably have a show at some point in the future. The 12 players that got away, or did they? Listen, I've been off for a week and I have been buzzing to get back on. So let's get some of the comments involved. Danny Boy, we have to get real about Matt O'Reilly's value. We'll need to talk about Matt O'Reilly as well. He is not playing in a top league and he wasn't even in Denmark's squad for the Euros. If we can get £25 million for him, then take it. It's good business. Right. You brought it up, Danny, so we're going to talk about it. We're not going to be negative about this one, but Matt O'Reilly clearly has attracted a lot of interest, Lawrence Conley, and some of the names that have been attributed to having that interest are Atalanta and Juventus. We know that back in January there was an approach by Atletico Madrid. Matt O'Reilly spoke about that. And there was also an approach in February by Fenerbahce as well. So there are clubs interested. I've seen a couple of English teams getting thrown into the hat as well. There are clubs interested, and what we're talking about now is the value of the player. We know that in the past we have sold players for 25 million quid. Jota a year ago, Kieran Tierney, when was that now? 2019? Kieran Tierney? 5 years ago? So £25 million is the most expensive sale from Scottish football. We know where we are in terms of the food chain, Lawrence. I'm going to put it out there. I don't think you accept a penny. If Celtic are at that stage where clubs are interested, Matt O'Reilly has made his feelings known and he does want to leave the club, we're going to have to talk about it. And I don't think you accept a penny less than 30 million quid. What's your thoughts, Lawrence?
Well, we're not short of cash. You know, so it's not like we're relying on this to fund a rebuild or fund anything. So if Matt O'Reilly's
or buy materials or supplies or any of that kind of stuff, Lawrence, we don't need it to do that, do we?
We're not going to hire a stadium with it. You know, we've got one to play in. But if Matt's unhappy, you know, there's a balance to be had. You don't want to keep him when he's unhappy. If he's made up his mind to leave, it's been kind of open and honest with his agent and saying, well, we're happy to let you go, but it's 30 million.
Yes.
If you don't think you're worth that, well, you know, this is what you give to us, and that's what we look at. And because we think you're worth that, we'd put you on 40 grand a week if you want to stay. You know, you can offer that option to him. And says, no, I'm definitely go. He says, well, you know, get your agent to find somebody to pay 30 million then. Because what was the first offer? 15 million euros.
Yeah.
You know, between goals and assists, you know, 34 last season. It's just way too low, I think. And I get that he wasn't in the Denmark squad. They had a settled midfield. And they run up to the Euros, he joined the squad a couple of times, but I think their team done all right without him. But just because he wasn't in the national team doesn't mean he's not worth that level of money. And, you know, he's young. His best years are definitely ahead of him. So I just can't see where they thought 15 or 18 million was ever going to interest Celtic. Yeah, I'd be looking between 25 and 30. I think depending on what add-ons you get, what percentage of future sale you get, that'll kind of have a reflection in the fee. Because I think Jota was just like 25 million. That was it, wasn't it? Kieran was 25 million plus a sell-on.
Yes. Yeah.
So Kieran's obviously worth a wee bit more then on that deal. But if you got significant sell-on and add-ons and 25 million for Matt, yeah, potentially could look at that, especially if you've got an unhappy player in your hands.
This is 37 goals, by the way, Lawrence, from midfield.
37 on goals and contributions.
37. I mean, that is incredible. That is the bit, Ian, right? Because I'm looking at this, and if Matt O'Reilly was to leave this summer, it's been almost like a perfect tenure. He's come in, low cost. You know, he was the second choice at the time. What was the other guy's name? Riley McGree. Where is he now?
Apparently interested in him again.
Yeah. Where is he now? He comes in and every single challenge that's been put in front of him, he's absolutely, you know, driven himself all the way through that. At the beginning of the season, he was one player that I really was excited to see under Brendan Rodgers, and he went out and had his best season in a Celtic jersey. He's done it on the Champions League stage. He's done it at international level, although he didn't make it to the Euros. Maybe just a wee bit too quick for him that particular tournament, although a lot of the pundits over in Denmark were surprised that he's a mission from the squad. But we get to that point where he is the star man in the Celtic squad. There's no doubt about it. He is a talisman. How do you replace that level of goal contribution from midfield? What would that cost to replace it? It's astonishing, and I don't think you take a penny less. Would be my approach to it than 30 million. But as Lawrence says, that could be made up of add-ons, etc. And I don't think it's so much he's an unhappy player, but he himself said, Ian, last season that it was quite unsettling for him because there was that interest in the January. If he was to start the season off as a Celtic player, having possibly had discussions with other Serie A clubs, etc., you're not going to get the same Matt O'Reilly potentially. So sometimes the time is perfect for everybody to come together, but you need to get paid in full, as the old saying goes. And I think 30 million is reasonable for a player of Matt O'Reilly in today's climate.
Of course it is. Of course it is, especially when you have like younger players down in England moving from 35 to sort of 50 million, with hardly any minutes under their belt, just because of the fact that they're across the border. So, but I think we've spoken about this before, that Matt O'Reilly, he's from good stock. He's got a good family round about him as well. They seem like they're a class unit, and he's got good advice. So, Celtic have an obligation, I think, to play fairly with him as well, but obviously not to the low ball numbers that we've seen quoted. We've got a value of him, but I can imagine the Celtic board saying with a straight face, it's going to cost that much to replace you. We won't spend that much on a replacement of you. We'll spend a fraction of it, but that was how much in this market we expect this would cost to replace a player of your caliber. And if that's kind of the value offers that are coming in, then maybe another season wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for him to knuckle down and have a stormer in the Champions League. Because that's where the interest from Atletico Madrid came. We played against them, so that was where that concrete interest came. So hopefully he's learned from that. The unsettling he's getting the attention. He's getting admiring glances from teams of that caliber. So if he keeps doing what he's good at, the move will eventually come. If it's not right now, it could be January, or it could be at the end of the next season. If it doesn't materialise this season, I'm sure it will. Though sees that Juventus are interested in him as well now. So it seems like he probably will go. And in terms of the replacement for him, I think Brendan Rodgers could. I think he's seen something in Bernardo. I think he has the same kind of gait. I've said this before. He kind of looks similar to him as well.
He does, doesn't he?
He glides across the pitch in a similar way. He's got that kind of long-legged, daddy long legs type thing, going on. So I think Brendan Rodgers is the ideal manager or coach to get similar kind of outputs from Bernardo, and I think that's probably what he's got one eye on. So yeah,
that's an interesting point, Ian, because when you look at the difference in the output between Matt O'Reilly's last season under Ange Postecoglou compared to his first season and potentially only season, sadly, under Brendan Rodgers, the transformation was incredible. It really was. So there's 2 points there. You could see something happening with Bernardo, and we're going to speak about him next because he could be the third part of this incredible triple signing announcement by Celtic. But they'll not do it all in one time. They need to do 3 different announcements for the traction on the old socials. Back in the day where you had the 6 guys all standing together on Celtic Park wearing the centenary jerseys, that's what we want to go back to. So yeah, you're looking at a player there. I think you make a great point. What can Brendan Rodgers do with Bernardo next season? You could see that transformation. People are saying, Bernardo's not a replacement for O'Reilly and all this kind of stuff. But again, going back to the way that Brendan Rodgers seems to be approaching this, he's looking at, okay, you've got that season in your tank. Next season is going to be different for Bernardo. And I do think it is. And I do rate the player. We've been lowballed, if you like, by Atlanta, and they're doing exactly the same to other clubs. That's probably just the way it goes. I think if we get Bernardo for 3.5 with the add-ons, I think that's a sensational deal. With regards to Matt O'Reilly moving on, what I would be interested in, and I don't know this. I would need to ask one of the data guys. I'd be interested to see midfielders within his age range, Lawrence, right, in European football with Champions League experience, who in a season has had 37 goal contributions, either scored or assisted. And where if they move, how much they're going for. I'd love to see that, because that would be another interesting gauge, wouldn't it, in terms of the transfer fee loans? Because he'll be pinging on everybody's radar. All these big clubs use data analysis when it comes to recruitment. So without having seen a player, they will be aware of the player due to the data. And that's why Stephen Welsh had so much interest from Italian clubs a couple of years ago, because his figures were really impressive. People watch the game and say, I don't rate him. But in terms of all these figures on a system, he was looking very impressive. But if in European football, Lawrence, a similar talent was available at his age with that output, 30 million would be that'd be the first offer you would be making.
Yeah, you'd think so, but some people would say, but Scottish football he's done a lot in. But he's done it in Champions League as well. So even if you just narrowed it down to say, well, a player of that age with his Champions League return, what we chat. But, I think Celtic hold the cards just now. I don't think they expected us to accept 15, or for that matter, 18. If it gets to 25, I think you're then looking at, well, what's the add-ons? What's our sell-on on it? I'd love Matt to stay, for us to put a contract with 40 grand in front of him. Say, well, look, we'll put a 30 million buyout. Let's stay with us another season. You've got 8 Champions League games this year.
At least.
At least.
That's me being positive.
Yeah, and it's going to raise your profile further yet again. If you do it in those, it's Atlanta, Juve, Atletico Madrid have been linked. You're going to get more teams coming if he does it in the Champions League games. We're not short cash. 18 million euros, what we're going to do, or 18 million quid, we're just going to stick it in the bank with the rest of the money, because we're not going to spend all the money we've got just now in the summer transfer window. So, yeah, it'd be silly to let him go for a small offer on there. Agree with Ian, Bernardo could be his replacement. I'm sure Brendan's probably identified Bernardo and another as being the attacking midfielders. Hopefully Ben Summers comes back and maybe he's the third choice in that position. And players can then start to say, well, look, there is a pathway here.
Yeah.
Bernardo came in for a season. He was understudy. Now he's stepped up, Matt. So Ben Summers have been out on loan. We think you're good enough to come in and be the third choice in the first team for that position.
Well, see, from those 2 games, Lawrence, because we've mentioned it a couple of times now, perhaps a third choice player should be the up-and-coming prospect. One guy I was really impressed with was Deddy at right back. I know that he can play right wing, but I thought in both games he looked brilliant. He put me in mind. I remember, and I've said this a few times on Acsom, going to those old, I remember Next Generation games, I think they were called, and it was a tournament that Mark Warburton was involved in pulling together.
Is that the City Trader?
What was that?
Is that the City Trader? Mark Warburton, City Trader?
The City Trader, yes. The City Trader. Yeah. And the guy that stood out for me was Darnell Fisher at right back. He was unbelievable up and down the line. And I looked, and he went on to have a great career, actually. A very good career, did Darnell Fisher. He only retired last season due to injury. But I thought Deddy looked excellent. And I would be happy if he was the third choice right back, in the same vein that we've been talking about the striker and the goalie ones. Yeah,
definitely. And hopefully Brendan, I'm sure he'll discuss it with the squad and lay it out. I'm sure he's got one-to-ones. He's meticulous, Brendan, with every player and say, look, this is my plan for you. He spoke about it. He done it with Danny Kelly and his agents and said, this is a plan. I've done it with Rocco. It didn't work out. They've moved on. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming, if we keep players now, we'll put some kind of pathway in front of them to allow them to say, actually, this is worth staying for. I can see myself getting a chance. And we 8 Champions League games. It's going to take a toll on the team, so that there may be more chances after that for them to get some minutes. But may not be starting, maybe 10, 20 minutes at the end of the game. But if they can see, actually, I'm going to get minutes in the first team, it's got to be more interesting for them, isn't it?
We see it with Mitchell Frame. Last week, I didn't think he stood out as much as Deddy, actually, during the 2 games that I watched there. But we've seen him last season thrown in. If you're the third choice and you're part of the Scottish quota, homegrown quota, then you might get Champions League. These are the things, Lawrence, like you say, that you're selling to the agent, you're selling to the player. If you're 18, 19 years of age and you're the third choice within your position at Celtic Football Club, you're doing okay. Magnet 67, afternoon Acsom community. As frustrating as it is, I believe Brendan Rodgers has a targeted plan and is executing it, exchanging quantity for quality, hopefully. Yeah, well, I mean, I would be very, very sad to see O'Reilly go, but any of the other departures, I can understand them. Haksabanovic, for example, these guys leaving the club, absolutely understood. Rocco Vata disappointed that he wasn't able to progress. He left a little sooner than expected, I think, was his Instagram post. David Boyle, great to see shoots of progress and forward thinking in the transfer window. Let's hope this thinking continues. At Celtic, I hope so as well. Rich Harrison, Italian press reporting that Atalanta offering 20 million euros for O'Reilly, which is well below his value. If they want 50 million for Cooper Miners from Juve, then they can afford 30 million quid for O'Reilly. It's that old thing at times, though, Ian. People do say it's like what Lawrence was saying, but it's only in Scotland. And I think that you look at some of the real success stories that Celtic have sold on and have gone on to bigger leagues, richer leagues, Van Dijk, Frimpong. There's some great examples of that I think would be your counter argument, surely, Ian.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what's the sort of, there was mooted figures for Lewis Ferguson, because he's had a couple of seasons for Bologna in Italy. They were talking like sort of 40-50 million euro for him to Juventus. And I wouldn't say that Matt O'Reilly is a worse player than him, so than Ferguson. So it's we do suffer from that kind of backwater kind of sniffy dismissiveness from a lot of sides, but like Larsson, Larsson received such dismissive tones from our cousins across the border, but he did it continually in Europe. He did it for Sweden. Matt's been doing all right for Denmark, but he's only he's a young buck still for the national team, and I'm sure his chance will come for them, and he'll be a mainstay for many years to come. But he's done it in the Champions League. He did it against Atletico Madrid. He performed really, really well to a really high standard. He did in all the games. I think he showed he elevated himself, put himself in that sort of short window. It's just, it is what it is. It is what it is.
We take it. We understand it, Ian. But when it comes to the value of a player, that's where the Champions League, I think, that's where that carrot really comes into play, because you look at that and think, well, let's be honest, this is where the top players are doing it, and we've got players who can do it at that level as well. I'm going to be looking at quite a few other aspects of what's happening in the world of Celtic. Keith Oakden, always great to see you from Plymouth. I'm guessing it's no sunny because you normally rub that in as well. Keith, good to hear from you. And Jungle Lion, here's Johnny. I've got to say, JL, my favourite movie of all time is The Shining. That's my top movie of all time. Love it. Could talk for an hour about it. So thanks for bringing that one back as well. Danny Boy, you're back in. I welcome Bernardo. Let's talk a wee bit about him then. I believe he'll become a truly gifted player for us, but we really would love some new blood. This is the thing, Lawrence. We bring in Bernardo, hopefully Ida. And by the way, we're being informed by Gordon Coney that there's no Ida in the Norwich squad today, which is interesting. And then you bring in the goalie, Schmeichel. That's bringing you back to where we were last season. You then bring in a second goalie. So there's still a lot of work to be done, Lawrence. 2 goalkeepers come in. Bernardo comes in. Let's say Ida would be the next one on the list. Where else do we need to strengthen in your view, Lawrence Conley?
Well, if Mark goes, you're going to need, I think, another attacking midfielder. Left back, centre half. And we weren't the best in the wings, were we? Kyogo had a disappointing season. And a lot of that was down to the quality of service he was getting. And I know the jury's still out in Kuhn. So Maeda's nailed down the first team spot. After those, did Palmer really do enough? Not too sure. So, yeah, I think we'd be looking probably a right winger, left back, centre half. And if Mark goes, an attacking midfielder.
Right, and what about striker? Because
Well,
if you bring in Ida, right?
Well,
you're still down to
it's
2.
the third choice. Do we have somebody in our ranks that can be that third choice striker? Does Brendan see anyone?
Yeah,
he could see he's developing, is putting down as a pathway, or does he think it's worth spending money just now? Because it's a lot of players to settle into a squad if we're bringing in 6 or 7. You know, would Brendan want to add the 8th just
Sure.
now? Would they see the value in it? Would they say, actually, you know, for the first half of that season, there's a boy just now that I think I could put a pathway in front of him and bring him on. You've also got Maeda, who can tuck in an emergency. You know, Liam's never done telling us he's better as a striker. So we've got options there. And it's whether Brendan would want to say, well, I'm going to sign a development striker. We were linked with a boy from South America, weren't they? 18 years old or something. So maybe he comes in as a development striker for us. You know, I'd love to see Memphis Depay coming in, but it doesn't look like Brendan's going to go down that route. But yeah, I think centre half definitely, left back. If Mark goes, you need an attacking midfielder and a bit of improvement on the wings, I think.
I want to touch on the wings slightly. Michel Ange, Balak Wishy was another one. Wisha, who has been linked to Celtic as well. He can play left wing or centre forward. So it looks as though it's one of the ones that won't be as much of a priority once either comes in, but it would be good to have a third choice. It's all about, I guess, trying to keep that third choice happy. I mean, we've seen it with O wanted games. Giakoumakis wanted games launched. There's only so long you can go without these guys getting games before they get itchy feet. They want to move on. And I think that's where the third choice, being a young up-and-coming player, is the perfect way to remedy that, isn't it?
Brendan seems to change his front five, doesn't he? He makes good use, sometimes even 6, you know, with the rules. Gets us panicking sometimes. But so the front two, you're going to be able to promise some minutes. Regular minutes they're going to get. It's your third choice. What's the pathway you're going to put in front of him? You know, if it's a young boy for the reserves or, you know, development striker comes in and you're explaining, well, after Champions League games, you probably get a chance then coming off the bench because the squad will be a bit tired. We'll need to rest them. We'll be looking then, maybe cup games, you'll be coming in. Yeah, if Brendan decided throughout the squad, I'm going to have a number 1 for each position, a number 2, and then a development player for every is going to be the third position. Right throughout the team. Ideal. You know, work. Yeah, well, all the players that you know we seem to be hemorrhaging, we could be looking at and going, actually, you're going to get a chance. And if they're good enough and they come in, they could do a Kieran Tierney. You know, come in and show the desire and dedication that Kieran done. Kneel down a jersey for you. If they're not good enough, at least they're getting a chance before they leave us. At least we're seeing them the first team. You know, other than, you know, with what? One game with Ben Dolt before he left. Hepburn. We're losing players too early before we're getting to see nearly enough of them in the first team. At least we'd get to see that and say, right, you've got what it takes, or you don't, you're showing something here before we lose them.
The thing with Doak, I mean, Doak's name's going to come up time and time again on this show, undoubtedly, and particularly when he absolutely bursts onto the scene, which will happen. And I would have loved to have seen that happen at the Euros. A couple of games, Dundee United, I think, and Rangers he played against as well. The problem with that was anybody that's seen him, from what I've been told, knew that he was ready, but Ange hadn't been told. And that, I think, is frightening. Nobody had bothered to tell the first team manager that they had a kid. Because, I mean, let's be honest, and this is why I keep going back to the Brendan Rodgers thing with the transfers. Brendan Rodgers' entire pre-season should not be running about with Michael Nicholson and Jay Lafleur to try and find players and identify players and sign players. That shouldn't be his role as a first team manager. And similarly, with Ange Postecoglou when he was at the club, he hasn't to watch every single, you know, game of football below the first team to identify himself who's ready for a step up. The guys who are running the academy, the guys who are the coaching these particular teams have to report to Ange. The boy's ready. Didn't happen quickly enough, unfortunately. Now, Paddy Lavery, will the real Paul John please stand up? I would, Paddy, but I'm wearing shorts, mate, because it was a late one last night and I don't want anybody to switch off. So thanks for the sentiment, though. And Danny boy, you're back in. Do you think the board know? This is interesting, right? I'm going to ask Ian and Lawrence. Do you think the board know that they are disliked by most fans, or do they really believe they're doing a great job? Ian? Right, I obviously can't speak for all fans. I know what the Acsom guys and girls think about it. I know what my friends and family think about it. I do honestly think that the vast majority of the board, that level of the club, Ian, think we're all doing a great job and it's all pats on the back and all that kind of stuff. And if you moan about it, you're being spoilt and entitled. I think that is basically the way that they operate, because they don't have the same investment, I don't think, as you or I when it comes to Celtic Football Club. And by the way, to a degree, that's understandable. But they do not see it, because I always go back to the journalist who tried for years, literally, to get an interview with Dermot Desmond. And he finally cold called him, having heard that he was at a business of his somewhere in the world. And he gets him on the end of the phone and he says, "Hi, blah, 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 blah. This is who I represent. This is my name. I've been trying to get you all this time. I want an interview with you." And Dermot Desmond said, "How many trophies have Celtic won since I became the major shareholder?" That was his opening gambit, Ian. And the guy, the journalist, for all his, all his research and efforts, didn't know the answer to the question. And therefore, Dermot Desmond hung up on him. So it's almost as if to say, right, put your medals on the table. You can't argue with that. We're a very, very successful football club. What are you moaning about? And I think that is the attitude. I genuinely think that's the attitude, Ian.
It definitely is. I actually don't think they care, to be honest. I think they it's an echo chamber. It really is. There's, how often do you see that kind of regeneration of different? I know Michael Nicholson came in, but he was part of that crony group, and they promoted from within. So we saw when we got the new chief exec from outside, he didn't last very long. So yeah, I think yeah, they don't care is the honest answer from my perspective. And we have dominated, domestic football. We really have. We've not really had a challenge, really, and we should be dominating. Rangers supposedly are our closest challengers, and they've not got the money. We've got lots of money, but we just keep just ahead of them. We don't really sort of move into the distance the way we could do. I was thinking the other day as well, right? That's another one of my favourite sayings. But it's like, I want Dermot Desmond was moved to bring Brendan in the first time because he was upset with the way that the Rangers directors celebrated, and obviously he brought him back. I think it was an inspired move to bring him back, so I applaud him for bringing Brendan Rodgers back so swiftly after Ange left. But I wonder, right, if Dermot Desmond would be embarrassed enough, say if there was like a cross-border competition like the Champions League. We used to have the the English-Scottish sort of cup games back in the day. Like we had the Anglo-Italian Cup and stuff. Yeah. I wonder if we had like a kind of a league format like the Champions League, but it was against our English cousins, right? And I wonder if he'd be embarrassed enough to invest a bit more then, because it's on your doorstep. Is it because it's Europe and it's kind of expected that we get sort of whipped with the whipping boys in Europe that it's acceptable? But would it be a harsher lesson to sort of take if it was the English that were whipping us routinely and pulling our pants down all the time?
It is an interesting question and discussion. In front of me, I've got, I don't know, about 30 years worth of Celtic views. And I remember, and I'll dig it out at some point, the very rare interview that Dermot Desmond gave in depth to the Celtic View. So he obviously asked himself the questions. But the headline was, "Celtic are bigger than Man United." So that was his kind of view at that time, Ian, right? And obviously, it's easy now, I think, for anybody within that echo chamber that you talk about and you described to say it's just too hard to compete in Europe because the gap's too wide. And it really annoyed me when Ian Bankier basically said that. As the chairman of the Celtic Football Club, he said that, didn't he, Lawrence? We just can't compete. It's just too difficult. How can we compete with these teams? But yeah, you're right. If you were to be playing against teams that, personally, I don't think can hold a torch to Celtic, like teams like Chelsea, who are going to be playing this summer, and were to play these teams regularly and they were to show us up, I think it maybe would spark something in them. But yeah, it was a point that was made by Danny there, Lawrence. I really don't think. I do think that it's very much our way or the highway. If you get somebody coming in with maybe a clarity of thought or a diversity of creative ideas, then they don't last that long. I think we've got a CEO who certainly I'm not criticising him, but he wasn't given the job because he had been the CEO of various other big companies and turned their turnaround and the turnover from 30 million to 300 million in the space of 3 years. He didn't have that track record, did he, of coming into a business and making big changes and being successful in that respect. So yeah, it's a difficult one to argue with, though, when we are so successful ones. And that was what the journalist felt when he finally got his interview with Dermot Desmond that lasted about 20 seconds.
But listen, no one's denying we're very successful, and I think that the rise in share price and where we're on financially, you can't deny it's a model that works and generates income. Domestically, you can't deny we've been the dominant force this century. There's areas that we'd like to improve in, particularly European football, youth development. Desmond's on record saying he tried to get Alex Ferguson in. Mm-hmm. He wasn't bringing him in to dominate Scottish football. Is that what he's brought Brendan in for? I've no doubt that, Dermot harbours ambitions of doing better in Europe, and I suppose we've got at least 8 games this season. So the returns are a bit bigger. You'd expect the investment into it to be bigger. I think where we fall down is we just find them very risk averse. We want them to be a wee bit more adventurous, don't we? And what they invest in the first team. And for us, it's kind of going, I said it before, it's easy for us to say, just buy that player. 15 million, we've got loads in the bank. We don't really have a lot riding on it because in reality, we're not making that decision, are we? It's not £15 million of Celtic supporters' money that we're putting at risk when we're saying that on here. Those guys there are definitely putting the risk in it. They get it right, they get it wrong. You look at Barkas and Ageti, a lot of money wasted. You look at guys like O'Reilly, it paid off. You could argue that the money they paid to bring in Robbie Keane loan, it worked. Eduardo, you almost doubled your money on him. So they've got a track record of getting it right. Sometimes I think everybody just feels the frustration. They're too risk adverse. We think there's a bigger opportunity than they seem to be exploiting. And maybe their answer was, we're not going to do that for four games in Europe. Well, you've got double the opportunity there. What's holding you back?
When you said Eduardo there, I had a flashback. Remember the wee Arsenal player that dived against us in Europe? Yes, remember? Yeah. Boric was in goals.
Did Donati score in that game?
He scored in the 3-1 game. That was his last game for Celtic, believe it or not, wearing the Bumblebee kit. And then he was sold without the say-so of Tony Mowbray or Peter Grant. According to Peter, when we spoke to him at Gracie's. Talking of Gracie's, Joe Ledley, he's a guy that's not on what you would call the circuit, but he's coming up to Glasgow in a couple of weeks. He's going to be joined by Charlie Mulgrew on the Saturday night in Grangemouth. He's going to be at Gracie's in Glasgow on the Friday night. There are tickets available. They're going quickly, I think, due to the fact that Joe hasn't done a great deal of these, but he's well thought of in the near history of Celtic Football Club. Obviously played in a very good, successful Celtic side, and he played in that Barcelona game that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago as well. So looking forward to seeing Joe. If you want to come along to see Joe Ledley live with the Celtic State of Mind, then the ticket links are underneath this video. Thank you again to everybody for tuning in, not only today, but in the last week when I've been having a wee break. How dare I? And thank you to everybody who stepped up to the plate, hosted the shows, contributed to the shows and got involved in the comments and all that kind of stuff. It looks as though we're going to have a few announcements very, very soon. Looking forward to that. And then it's a wee trip to America to follow Celtic against DC United, Man City and Chelsea. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved. It's been great fun to be back. Thanks for having me, guys. And thank you to Lawrence Conley and Ian Conroy for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.